listening to the Betmaker Show. This is the NFL Playoffs preview for Monday, January 13th, 2020. And now, live from Las Vegas, the host of the Betmaker Show, Brian Blessing.
All right, gang, we heard from Jack on the odds-making side of the counter. Now we're going to focus on the handicapping side of the counter. Brian Blessing and Bruce Marshall from the Gold Sheet. We're in Las Vegas. We watched those games together over the weekend, Bruce, and it was a wild weekend. You had a lot of overtimes and wild card weekend, and you had just some bizarre results. Tennessee with a Sasquatch foot on Baltimore. The KC-Houston game was a tale of two games. Just bizarre playoff action. That's all I can think of.
Yeah, it was. None of the games resembled one another, and there wasn't really a dramatic finish until that Seattle game, and it could have been a little bit more dramatic if Seattle played it a little bit differently in the final 3 minutes. But here we go with the Final Four, and one surprise team in there, although the way Tennessee's playing right now, I'm not sure it's much of a surprise. They're on quite a roll. And we will, and the point spread's pretty similar. We'll talk about those more in a second. I know Jack just talked about them, but two numbers pretty similar. Total's a little bit different for the title games, but intriguing matchups as always.
All right, well, let's dive in, and we'll start with Tennessee and Kansas City. And we're seeing Kansas City 7.5, 51.5, 52, mostly 52. Let's call the consensus. I get the side, Bruce, but as the games were unfolding, you and I and Andy Isco and our good friend Chuck on the other side of the counter, we were kicking the tires on this. And the side's where I thought it would be. I will say I think the total is low at 52. Tennessee, yes, they run the ball, but Henry produces chunk plays. But if he's effective, he also helps produce big plays via the play action. And Kansas City just showed that they're not going to take their foot off the pedal. They have no running game other than Mahomes scrambling around, and they're going to be throwing it a lot. So it's an intriguing matchup. I don't think Kansas City's very good against the run. So I think there's going to be a lot of points in that game.
Yeah, there was in the regular season, Brian. They met mid-November in Nashville, 35-32 in retrospect, and that was a Tennessee win. In retrospect, one of the highlight games of the year, really, back and forth, especially in the fourth quarter, multiples of scores in the final few minutes there. That's when Derrick Henry really started to roll. He ran for 188 in that game. He had a 68-yard touchdown run. The same sort of big runs we've been seeing from him a lot in the second half of the season. Tannehill, that was his fourth game starting for Tennessee after he took over for Mariota. And Mahomes came back that game after sitting out a few weeks previous to that with the knee injury. It's interesting that Tennessee also was here 2 seasons ago and won that wild card game over Andy Reid, although in that game it was Mariota versus Alex Smith, and it was Mike Mularkey coaching the Titans. So anyway, there's a little bit of history here between these sides, but I quite agree with you that we're going to probably see this one go over, like we saw that game in mid-November that ended 35-32 Titans.
It's funny, those of you that play fantasy football can relate to this. Many of you will say, I could care less about that stuff, but I had Derrick Henry on my fantasy team, and he was a gold mine, and he cost me the championship in my league because they rested him in week 16. But I watched Tennessee every week, and it was so frustrating, Bruce, because I had this guy to watch him get them down there, and then Tannehill would scramble or do a play action, but there'd be many, many games where they just didn't use this guy. It was the threat of Henry. And it's reaping rewards now if that was their goal, to keep this guy fresh. But he is an absolute monster. And Tannehill's playing at a high level, and they've got wide receivers that can stretch the field. I was all about them beating New England, and I thought they would absolutely hang with Baltimore. But to be that impressive is pretty telling. The only rub would be, I think, is that they have just been road warriors here. Had to play it on the road in Week 17, 2 road games in the playoffs, and Kansas City only had to play the 1 game. That would be the only chink in the armor I can find.
Yeah, they seem to keep getting better, though. I mean, they're beating better teams each successive week. Houston, although they were a little under strength for that Week 17 game, at New England, knocking off the Patriots, ending their title reign, at Baltimore, the number 1 seed. You mentioned Henry. Yeah, he was on my fantasy team too. Yeah, I was at times during the season. I think that Houston game at home, the one you're referring to, where late in the season, where Henry worked his way downfield, and then Tannehill made some mistakes deep in Houston's end of the field. But for the most part, since midseason, and really since Tannehill came in after Week 6, Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator, has been using Henry much better. I thought he used him too much as a decoy the first month and a half, of the season. And down the stretch, though, they have been using him properly. How about that little jump pass touchdown for Henry? At the time, I wasn't sure about resting him that game against the Saints, but it's worked out well. And how about this stat? No NFL back ever, no Jim Brown, no Walter Payton, no Emmitt Smith, no anybody has ever rushed for 180 or more in 3 successive games, much less the last 2 being playoff games. That's the sort of streak Henry is on right now, and nobody's really been able to stop him. And this is not a great rushing defense on Kansas City's side, so I don't think you're going to see Tennessee fall into the trap Houston did on Sunday of all of a sudden the game starts going too fast and they're giving the ball back to Kansas City too quickly. I don't think there's any chance the Chiefs get 4 possessions in any quarter like they did in the second quarter on Sunday.
Well, the crazy thing, if there was a level of versatility, I would say I can see Kansas City playing their game, and it's Kansas City in the over. The thing is, with the Tennessee running game, Bruce, I could see Tennessee in the under, but with the play action and the way they're executing on offense, I can also see Tennessee winning a higher scoring game. It's bizarre. I mean, I know Kansas City's kind of a video game offense, but their lack of a running game in some ways is limiting if the defensive plan is good.
Well, it is, and I thought what Tennessee did, and by the way, 2 unders for Tennessee in these 2 playoff games. We like this and over. Our score was 30-27. Tennessee. We're going to pick them to win this thing outright. I think what they did against Lamar Jackson. Now, you look at the stat box there, and you may really get deceived in the game against the Ravens. Baltimore had over 500 yards of offense. Most of those were very, very hollow yards. They were chasing the game late. They had Lamar Jackson flustered, a couple of picks. They sacked him 4 times.
He had 2 or 3 good runs, Bruce, when they were playing 2 deep zone, when they were playing clock. I mean, so it's kind of it'll fool you a little bit if you just looked at a box score.
Yeah, it was a lot of hollow yards there by Jackson, and it was a brilliant defensive game plan, I thought, by Vrabel, who, by the way, is impressing me more and more each week. I mean, there are pivot points in a game, and there's game psychology, and there's things like that some of these coaches like Bill O'Brien haven't yet to master in their career. And I think Vrabel's got that right now. He knows what buttons to push. And really, time began with these guys when they finally moved Mariota out of the lineup and they went with Tannehill since. They're 9-3 since with the Tannehill. And so it's been a different team. And with Henry running, and now they haven't had to throw that much in the playoffs thus far. But I think Tannehill is capable of doing that against these guys. And he had some big plays in the first game. And I think there's a chance Tennessee goes in there and wins. I still do not. I'm not convinced about this Kansas City defense either. Houston was moving the ball pretty well yesterday. All those teams that Kansas City played down the stretch on the defense looked good, really in various forms of distress offensively. I is going to be Tennessee can win.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I'm just curious, we always say, what you last saw. So, of course, Kansas City plays on Sunday. We're seeing 7.5. I think some 7s will pop up during the week, but I'm just a little curious. I get it. Home field. I'm just curious. Tennessee catching 10 against Baltimore. And, I think the lion's share of the world thought Baltimore was just going to destroy them, and it was completely the opposite. Did Tennessee get enough credit for that game? And it wasn't the last thing we saw, but we saw it on Saturday. I thought 7 maybe should have been the number here. Do you think the number's a touch on the high side?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think Tennessee can win, so I think it's a little high. But I thought it would come out 7, so I'm a little surprised they put that hook on it right at the start, and we'll see where it moves. But I thought there is less chance of a game like a flow of a game like KC Houston repeating this week. That was just one of those strange games, and it was sort of a deceiving scoreline, I think. And I don't think you're going to see Tennessee make the sort of strategic blunders that Houston did that allowed the momentum to switch so dramatically as it did in the Chiefs game on Sunday.
Right. For outstanding information and special offerings and promotions, we invite you and encourage you to sign up for our newsletter today simply by going to the website at betmaker.com. And we'll wrap it up with this. On a week-to-week basis, adjustments that these guys make. And listen, Vrabel was around one of the best. Belichick in terms of, what is he going to take away? And they did frustrate Lamar Jackson. I had Travis Kelce over 73 receiving yards. Thought he'd be a focal point of there. I didn't think it was going to be the circus act that it was, but I would think Tennessee's going to spend the better part of the week doubling up Travis Kelce and working to slow him down, which could produce some really big plays for Hill, Watkins, and the speedsters they have over the top. It's going to be an intriguing chess match.
It will be. Tennessee's got some better cover guys, I think, back in the secondary than Houston does. And I think they'll have a better chance to do something. Ryan and Byard are really good big play guys back in the secondary there. For Dean Pease, a veteran defensive coordinator who has been here before. He was the one at Baltimore when they won the Super Bowl against the 49ers several years ago. And so we'll see what happens. By the way, just one other note. We are also, if results go a certain way this weekend, you could have a Kansas City Green Bay rematch.
Oh, Super Bowl one that you were at.
So we'll get to that, I'm sure, down the road here.
Bruce Marshall and Rocket Man.
That's right. We were there.
All right, let's go to the NFC Championship game. Green Bay, San Francisco, San Fran 7. Total on the game is 45. Let's start with the visitors here. Wow, Bruce. Again, I think I probably do the same thing again this week. The Green Bay Seattle game, I went in with a real defined approach. We talked about this on the podcast last week. For whatever reason, Green Bay's scripted stuff in the early stages of games is electric. And then teams make adjustments, and it's a combo of them taking their foot off the pedal. I probably play Green Bay again in the first half. I laid the 3 in the first half yesterday. I chickened out. I did not play Seattle in the second half and should have, because that was the thought. But maybe I just didn't trust Seattle enough. But, boy, at the end of that game, there are little things. I mean, a missed field goal maybe changes, your approach at the end. But the bottom line is one play, that game ended. And I'm telling you, the result would have been different. Green Bay was on their heels. Wilson throws a 20-yard pass. They're going to be across midfield with all the momentum in the world. And you and I playing catch in the driveway, you'd have caught it. Malik Turner dropped the pass. And that one play derailed this thing, or Seattle's playing in this game. I'm telling you.
I agree with you. And by the way, my ears might not still be good from Rocket Man at first Super Bowl. That was the loudest thing I ever heard in my life 52 years ago. But no, you're right. And Seattle in that game. By the way, I don't know that Pete Carroll should have punted on that fourth down with 3 minutes left. I agree. At 4th and 12. And you got Russell Wilson, and go ahead and go for it then, even if not. Well, we can get into that more later, but whatever. You're spot on there with what you talked about, the sequence of how Green Bay's games have evolved. That is reflected in stats too, that their yardage numbers and all of their offensive numbers are so much better in the first quarter than they are for the rest of the game, especially in the second half. And we saw a great example of that yesterday. They jumped out quick, and then whatever, a combination, like you say, teams adjusting, LaFleur taking his foot off the pedal. LaFleur, I have maintained, is really coaching and play calling with the Packers this year, more to the original Sean McVay script. And, LaFleur is a McVay guy. And the way McVay called the games 2 years ago with the Rams, when they really revolved a lot around Gurley, this Green Bay team is doing a lot more. Aaron Jones is more of a central point, even than Rodgers at times.
And the defense is better. They addressed that in the offseason.
Yeah, the Smith boys there at the edge are able to generate some pressure and collapse pockets. And by the way, McVay didn't call games like that this season. One reason the Rams aren't in the playoffs, but whatever. Green Bay did that. But I maintain that things have broken so incredibly well for Green Bay all year. I thought had the Saints gone up there, here we are bringing up the Saints again. I thought the Saints would have beaten them up there if they went up there. Seattle certainly had a shot, and Seattle's a bit shorthanded right now. I think we have to look back at, again, we've got a rematch here of a game in late November. They flexed this one to Sunday night, and it was all 49ers. And the Packers just didn't show in that game, or they were just throttled early. And now in that one, there was no fast start for Green Bay. First 4 possessions didn't do anything. I don't think they got a first down. And it was San Francisco's pass rush collapsing the pocket around Rodgers. You figure they're going to try to do something more with him. LaFleur's no dummy, so they're not going to sit him back there the way Cousins was last week. Getting their ground game to work a little bit would help. Minnesota didn't have that advantage. Cook was stonewalled last week, but it sure didn't work well for Green Bay in the first game, and it was Rodgers' worst game ever as a pro, only 104 yards passing. He was strip sacked. He fumbled. He was sacked 5 times, pressured countless more, 37-8 49ers. Won't be that lopsided, I don't think, but I think that's the challenge for Green Bay to try to make this thing more competitive than 7 weeks ago.
Well, I would say this too, but at the end of the day, you're going to have Rodgers versus Garoppolo. If it's a close game, okay, you can make the case edge Packers. But if I think Tennessee didn't get enough credit for how they handled Baltimore, I've got to give full marks. I was dead wrong. I nailed the other 3 games. I really thought Minnesota was coming in here with a real opportunity to get something done. And they shut Cook down. He did nothing. And you nailed it, Bruce. San Francisco's pass rush, their defense, the secondary, the whole 9 yards, they made Minnesota look bad. And believe me, I think Minnesota was a very dangerous team. So I think San Francisco should get a world of credit the way they played it. I think the easy thing is for people to say, oh, it's Kirk Cousins. And I'm like, I don't know if that, I'm inclined to, I'm not going to shoot holes at Kirk Cousins. I'm going to give credit to the Niners D.
Well, if they're looking back, I mean, Rodgers looked worse than Cousins did when he faced the 49er defense. And I've seen San Francisco, and by that, they're healthy again now. They got Armstrong back, they got D Ford back, you've got Armstead, you got Buckner, you got Bosa up front. I mean, they really collapse a pocket on you. And we saw them in some games this year really just dismantle some teams. I mean, the Rams, that game, the first game against the Rams, back to that Monday night game against the Browns. I mean, that turned out to be kind of a watershed game. I didn't know San Francisco was that good or Cleveland was that bad until that game, and the 49ers just sort of unmasked them. The Green Bay game in late November. I mean, they really physically overwhelmed some of these teams with that defense. And I'll tell you, Garoppolo, San Francisco, I sometimes I'm a little concerned that they don't punch the ball in and finish drives, but it's a little different offense than back in September. One, they added Emmanuel Sanders from Denver, cultured wide receiver, gives them a downfield threat, and Deebo Samuel from South Carolina has really emerged, the rookie, into a home run dimension for this offense. They got everything going for them right now, and they're at home, and they are feeling really good. It was 28-13, our score forecast here for the 49ers.
Yeah, I tell you, I don't think it's a secret weapon, but it's an intriguing thing. And sometimes you sit there and say, Henry, you line this mule up and you ride him. But San Francisco with Coleman, Mostert, and Breida, all 3 of these guys are starting running backs, and any one of those guys can take the ball to the house on any given play. So they are consistently rolling fresh, dangerous running backs in there. I think that flies under the radar. That's an army of running backs.
Yeah, and that's a quintessential three-headed monster there at running back. I mean, they can rotate these guys. They all catch the ball well too. So I mean, they're versatile and they can run. And Garoppolo, by the way, that was the thought. He hasn't won a playoff game yet. Well, now he's got one. And he was certainly around when New England was winning, so he's been used to winning. Garoppolo's record as a starting quarterback is something outstanding. So he's up to the task, I think, and he's got that defense to lean on as well.
Well, intriguing chess matches, to say the very least. We're down to Championship Sunday. Bruce, should be compelling, and next time we commiserate, it'll be about the big game.
Let's make some money tonight.
Well, that's the Betmaker Show for now. We publish multiple times each week. We'd like to thank you for listening, and if you liked what you heard, please take a moment to leave a rating and review, or subscribe to our show feed, or share our show with a friend or two and help us grow the show. We very much appreciate it. Visit us on the web at betmaker.com, and reminder to sign up for the newsletter. Thanks to our engineer, Darren Vandermolen, and producer, Mike Gallivan. The Betmaker Show is a production of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated. Betmaker is a registered trademark. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this content without the express written consent of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated is strictly prohibited.
The handicapping and sports odds information contained on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Please confirm the wagering regulations in your jurisdiction, as they vary from state to state, province to province, and country to country. Using this information to contravene any law or statute is prohibited. The podcast is not associated with, nor is it endorsed by any professional or collegiate league, association, or team. This podcast does not target and is not intended for an audience under the age of 18. If you think that you have a gambling addiction, stop this podcast now and please seek help.
Gambling and betting on sports is a form of entertainment and should be about having a good time. But when done excessively, it may negatively affect other areas of a person's life, such as their physical and mental health, school or work performance, finances, and/or interpersonal relationships. At Betmaker.com and The Betmaker Show, we're concerned about the addiction that gambling may cause, and for this reason, we encourage everyone to practice responsible gambling. An approach to gambling that helps you ensure that it remains an enjoyable activity. Here are the main principles of responsible gambling. Don't think of gambling as a way to make money. Always gamble with money that you can afford to lose. Set limits and stick to them. Never chase losses. Don't gamble when you're depressed or upset, and create a healthy balance. Always be aware of how much time you spend gambling or thinking about gambling. And do not allow gambling to cause you to miss out on time with family and friends or time spent on other activities you enjoy. By following these guidelines, gambling can be a good time and great entertainment. If you feel at any time that your gambling is taking away from important areas of your life, is causing you stress or depression, or is leading to financial losses that are beyond your control, please reach out for help. Learn more at responsiblegambling.org.